So, hello everyone and good evening. My name is Jay Stroy. I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Program Assistant here at NAMI, New Hampshire. And I'm so excited to bring this training to everyone. We are here today with the Youth Success Project and their team to hear a little bit more about youth and young adult homelessness in New Hampshire. So, I'm going to turn things over to Susan and we're going to get started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are really thrilled to have with us today Becca Ivansko, the director of the Youth Success Project, Molly Houle, the assistant director, as well as Madison LeMay and Jackson Robidoux. Youth Success Project is a youth-led organization focused on centering and uplifting the voices and lived experience of young people who have experienced unaccompanied homelessness without a parent or guardian, all under the age of 25 in our state. We believe Youth Success Project, believes that youth have a right to be included in decision-making that impacts their lives and communities, and that systems need to work better and be informed by lived experience. So welcome. We're really pleased to have you, and we're looking forward to today's webinar.
Thank you for that introduction. So my name is Becca Ivansko. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Youth Success Project. We'll do other introductions in a minute, but I'm gonna get my screen shared. All right. Can everybody see that? Looks good. Perfect. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about youth homelessness, specifically in the state of New Hampshire. We'll talk a little bit about who we are as an organization and what we do, and we'll have time for some questions. This is a very brief overview of youth homelessness, as it can go very deep and there's a lot more information. But this is a pretty good overview of what it looks like, and just kind of explaining how to authentically work with youth. So our objectives today, we're going to learn about and understand some of the unique barriers that youth and young adults face while experiencing housing instability or homelessness. We'll orient towards collaborating with young people when working individually with them and when developing systems and policies that directly impact them. And we'll review best practices for working with youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. If you see the acronym YYA, that stands for Youth and Young Adult, just another way of saying it without typing it all out. So, all right, Maddie.
So these are our group norms. This is something that we kind of go over in every meeting just to make sure we're all on the same page. So first off, don't use the word kids to describe teenagers and young adults. Be open-minded to what we're sharing. Take space, make space. Call on one another in and hold each other accountable. I don't know why I struggled with that so hard. Assume the best intentions. Be as present as you're able. Try to avoid multitasking. Express your opinions in respectful ways. Remember, there are youth in the space, and lean into discomfort and don't take things personally.
And just as an alternative to kids, we like to use the word youth, students, participants if you're working directly with them, clients. And just something that I like to remind everybody of is that there are youth with lived experience in this space. And so being respectful of the words that we're using and just being respectful of their stories is really important. So we'll do a quick round of introductions right now. So like I had said, my name is Becca Ivansko. I am the director. I will pass it over to Molly.
Everybody, I'm Molly. I am the assistant director at YSP. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Maddie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm white, and I'm a youth leader.
Hey, y'all. Hopefully you can hear me. My connection's a little spotty right now, but I'm Jackson Robidoux. I'm white. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm also YSP leader.
And then we also have a director of sustainability named Ariel. Some of you might already know her. She was the past director, but she is in grad school and has moved to part-time work. And she is the director of sustainability. She focuses on funding and grants and more of the behind the scenes kind of stuff. So that is our team. Maddie?
So we are a board of young people who have experienced homelessness in New Hampshire while under the age of 25 without a parent or guardian. So as YSP, our board, we make sure that youth voices and lived experience are a part of decision-making spaces. Or part of decision-making by adults about services and supports for young people experiencing homelessness. The YSP has helped write plans for how to end youth homelessness in New Hampshire, like making our coordinated community plan for YHDP. Trained case managers on how to work with young people, push for support for students on college campuses, made an art book, and a bunch of other things.
So everybody on our team, part of YSP, all has lived experience of homelessness or housing insecurity, including the directors. So it's something that we really value as lived experience, and we believe that our youth know their lives the best, and can make those decisions, like the best decisions for them.
How is youth homelessness defined? So there isn't a singular definition of homelessness that federal agencies use. DHHS, the Department of Ed, and HUD all use different definitions. We define youth homelessness as young people under the age of 25 who lack adequate, safe, or stable housing and are disconnected from a parent or guardian. The state of New Hampshire defines homelessness as individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, including children and youth. And there are a plethora of living arrangements that are considered homelessness, such as sharing, housing or being doubled up, living in motels or hotels, living in cars, living in emergency or transitional shelters, or living in substandard housing, so housing that's not adequate, or a place that isn't designed for people to live or sleep in normally.
And we just have a little short video. This video is made by National Network for Youth. They mentioned COVID in here as one of the reasons why family and youth may not access shelters. There's a lot of other reasons, but this is just a good short video, and then we can kind of talk about it a little bit after.
When people think of homelessness, they often think of this. But for children and youth, it can also look like this. And this. Many communities face shortages of safe shelter or housing options. And in light of the pandemic, many families and youth avoid shelters due to fear of COVID-19. So families and youth often stay in other places that are crowded, unstable, and unsafe for growing children and youth. Schools consider these situations to be homelessness, but these children and youth still don't qualify for many housing resources. That means families and youth can't access the housing and services they need, continuing to suffer. We must change how we see homelessness so that children and youth experiencing all forms of homelessness can be seen, served, and have a chance to build a better future.
So obviously they use COVID as a reason for why youth and families do not access shelter. We know that there are not adequate shelter spaces in New Hampshire specifically to accommodate all of these youth families. And they are also often very unsafe for youth to be at. And due to either past trauma or experiences with different programming and things like that, we find that youth aren't often open to these kind of shelters and would rather sleep outside than sleep in a shelter. So there's something really important. Maddie?
Yep. So there are different types of homelessness: couch surfing, staying with friends or family, running away, living in a shelter. living in a hotel or seasonal rental, sleeping in a car or outside, along with many other forms. These are just some pretty basic examples that YSP has noticed, I guess is the right word.
And something that's very unique to New Hampshire is that we do have a lot of seasonal rentals. And so we see a lot of youth and families living on campsites when it's warm out, and then not having really anywhere to go in the winter times, or doing a cheap rental maybe on the seacoast in Hampton or something like that. And then that only lasting for a few months. So them sort of being experiencing homelessness again once that rental is up.
So indications of youth homelessness, tardiness or absence in school or work, poor hygiene, wearing the same clothes repeatedly or not appropriately dressed for the weather, unmet medical dental needs, fatigue, hunger, enrollment at multiple schools, lack of records, gaps in learning, social and behavioral challenges or changes like extreme shyness, anxiety, or signs of depression or being withdrawn, lack of participation in school or work-related activities like field trips, and also lack of supportive relationships, parents, friends, teachers, guardians. So some of the barriers homeless youth and young adults face are limited access to services. So housing without parental consent if you're under 18, no rental history, if not bad rental history, poor and no credit, transportation, lack of employment and educational opportunities, mental health, lack of services specific to youth, and systems are complicated and difficult to navigate, like insurance, food stamps, anything with DHHS.
Before we get into the data, I don't know if Maddie and Jackson, if you guys wanted to speak a little bit to the barriers and indications of youth homelessness, or if you guys wanted to add anything to that.
The indications for youth homelessness, I would also say maybe an over involvement of school and like after school activities. When I was in high school and I was facing housing instability, I spent a lot of time at my local youth center. They provided hot meals, clothes. Like I was able to get a lot of my needs met there. So I went every possible day, every possible minute I could to avoid being home.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that in general, just, due to the economy, young people are far more likely to be already in a double up situation, whether that's with family or with friends or whatever the situation is. And a lot of young people are just one paycheck away or one decision away from being literally homeless. And I don't know if enough people really like recognize that.
So being doubled up just means that you're living with another person, a family member, or something like that. Usually there's not enough space, and usually it's a temporary situation that doesn't have, like, usually is not protected by a lease, which still would mean that that young person could be asked to leave at any point. Talking about the definitions, with HUD, so the Housing and Urban Development, and Department of Education, and then what was the other one? Department of Health and Human Services, I believe. Yeah. With those all using different definitions of homelessness, it means that it affects different types of funding, and it also means that families may not qualify for like certain services. So they may qualify for food stamps, but then they won't qualify, say, for a housing voucher or something like that. And so it makes it really difficult for people experiencing homelessness to navigate these systems, since they all use different definitions, and they all have different requirements, if you will. So now we're going to talk about data a little bit, which with all of these different definitions of homelessness, we know that homelessness is extremely underreported for any population, but specifically for youth. So youth homelessness is extremely underreported, and youth are really, really good at flying under the radar. We know this. And I know from a lot of our own lived experience, a lot of us flew under the radar and did not seek services. And some of these reasons are due to the fear of DCYF involvement, if under the age of 18, or getting a parent in trouble. Sometimes if, you know, if a young person goes and seeks help, they might get retaliation at home if it is an abusive situation, or they fear that their parents could be arrested or reported and they could get pulled out of the home, or pulled out of their parents' or guardians' care. Embarrassment or fear to report or ask for help. Fear of shelters and programming. I know I mentioned this a little bit before, but this is something that is extremely common when it comes to young people. So there might be services, there might be some, you know, youth programs, but a lot of the times, there is a lot of trauma that comes with that, when youth are accessing those programmings or shelters. Youth move around a lot. So we know this by looking at data in New Hampshire, that youth kind of bounce around the state in different areas and different things like that, which means that they're easy to fall off the radar for people if they're not coming in every day, or maybe they stopped answering your phone calls. And then another reason is lack of services available. So there's not a lot of youth specific programs or shelters in the state of New Hampshire. There are a few. There is one in Bethlehem, there's one in Claremont, Manchester, and there was one in Nashua, but that has since closed. And those are just shelters, right? There are other housing programs like transitional housing and things like that scattered across the state. But as far as shelter goes, those are the only ones that exist. So this data is pulled from the National Network for Youth. So Black youth face an 83% increased risk than their white peers. Hispanic youth face a 33% increased risk. LGBTQ youth were more than twice as likely to have experienced homelessness. And young parents, especially unmarried, had a 3 times higher risk than non-parenting peers. And youth who do not complete high school are 3.5 times more likely to experience homelessness than peers who completed a high school diploma. And this is like nationwide data. We're going to get into New Hampshire specific data in a second. But this is nationwide data, and but we see that these numbers are reflective in our state as well. So this is the Chapin Hall study, and this was a study that was done in 2017, and it's an estimate of global or of national youth homelessness, and it was a big study that was done, and they got a lot of really great data from it. It's all available online if you wanted to read through it. But it said 1 in 10 young adults ages 18 to 25 endures some form of homelessness in a year. Half of the prevalence involves couch surfing only. So we know that couch surfing is really common. You know, you have friends who say, oh, you could stay here for a few weeks, and then maybe they have a family member who allows them to stay there. 1 in 30 adolescent minors aged 13 to 17 endures some form of homelessness in a year. A quarter of the prevalence involves couch surfing only. Something that I always just like to remind people of is that if you are working with a minor under the age of 18, homelessness is not a reportable reason, or it's not a reason to report somebody to DCYF, and DCYF cannot remove a child solely based on homelessness. So that's just something really important, because I feel like there is sometimes a stigma around parents who are experiencing homelessness with children. It's not a removable report. So 346% of or youth with less than a high school diploma or GED had a 346% higher risk. And LGBT youth had a 120% higher risk. Youth reporting annual household income of less than $24,000 had a 162% higher risk. 33%, or Hispanic and non-white youth had a 33% higher risk. Black or African American youth had an 83% higher risk, and unmarried parenting youth had a 200% higher risk. And then about half of the youth who experience homelessness over a year face homelessness for the first time. So these are just some important data points. Like I said, there is a whole study that is really wonderful and really is one of the only studies out there that really looks at and breaks down youth homelessness. So the Youth Success Project held a youth count in 2022 where we surveyed 1,476 young people in the state. And this was specifically talking about their experience with homelessness, whether they were currently experiencing it or had previously experienced unaccompanied homelessness. So this is all specific to New Hampshire. So 46% of respondents indicated they are unstably housed, including couch surfing. 8% of respondents report being unsheltered. 40% of respondents indicated engaging in survival sex. 61% of respondents indicated being removed from their home by DCYF. So again, we had 1,476 respondents. The average age of the first homelessness experience was 16. Nearly 1 out of 2 of respondents reported having employment. And that's something that, and that fact, and then 87% of respondents reported not using illegal drugs. So there's a really big stigma around people experiencing homelessness, that they have a substance use problem or they are not working. We can see from this data that that is likely not the case for most of these young people. And so really trying to work through that stigma that is set, that a lot of these young people are working or they're in school and they're not using substances. And then 45% of respondents reported struggling with mental health at least half the time. And then there is a racial breakdown. So there were 60% of white respondents, 11% of Native American Pacific Islander. Black and African American mix was 26% and Asian was 3%. And again, this was done in 2022, and all of this information is on our website as well. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about adultism and authentic youth engagement. So we'll explain what adultism is and what it means to authentically work with youth.
Yeah, so what is adultism? Adultism describes the systems of privileged attitudes and behaviors that adults have over those of young people. Adultism is driven by behaviors and attitudes that are based on the assumption that adults are better than young people and therefore entitles them to act upon or on behalf of young people without their agreement. So we see so many examples in today's society. You're so mature for your age, young and dumb. Those may seem just like words, they're just common sayings, but they really are reflective of the attitudes that our society has towards young people and their value. And then there's ageism, which differs from adultism. Ageism describes the systems of privileged attitudes and behaviors that younger people have over elders.
Another form of adultism that I just like to tie into this, that to just show that we really do see it everywhere. My partner is an electrician. He's a licensed electrician. He has been doing it for quite a few years. But because he is a young licensed electrician, he often is met with a lot of, not attitude, but not acceptance from people who have been an electrician for 30, 40 years. And when he told me about a situation that he was having, I was like, that's adultism. So just something to keep in mind, saying, you know, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. That's a huge one that is common in our kind of language, but that's adultess, and really just makes youth feel like they are not valued and not an equal to whoever they are kind of working with.
And then there's tokenism. So when working with youth, there are different levels of youth engagement, and what we really want to avoid is tokenism. And tokenism occurs when adults do not truly share power with young people, and really it is performative engagement. So some examples of tokenism are having young people around with no clear role to play, assigning youth the tasks that adults don't want to do, having youth make media appearances without any voice in developing the messages, programs, or policies that are part of those, having a single youth on a board of directors or council, and getting to point to them as youth involvement. And this kind of performative youth engagement often leaves young people feeling used, and when we're authentically engaging with youth, they should feel empowered.
So these are some best practices to avoid adultism and to really engage with youth on a level that's going to empower them and to involve them in their decision making, whether this be for a mental health treatment plan, whether this be for their housing plan. They should be involved in all of these processes, and they should have, their voice should be valued. So change the power in relationships wherever is appropriate. Consider refraining from using authority. So if you know you have authority over that young person, like, let's not use, like, try not to use that. Have high expectations of young people's potential and positively assess their current abilities. Young people are very, very intelligent about their lives, and they will often probably blow you away with how much they know and how intelligent they are. Go to youth spaces and their turf, right? Doctors' offices, therapy offices, these spaces can often be really uncomfortable and traumatizing to youth. So if a youth would rather meet you at, I don't know, at one of their youth centers, or maybe they want to go grab a coffee, it might work better for them and it might help you build a relationship, which again, build one-on-one relationships. Assist young people as they rely on each other and take themselves and each other seriously. Something that Maddie and Jackson do really well in YSP is they are able to work off of each other. They share ideas, they run work groups, they are fully capable in everything that they do. And I enjoy getting to watch them grow and learn and all of that stuff. Remember that youth are their own experts, so ask for their input. Help people develop leadership skills. That's something that we focus a lot on in YSP. We obviously have a leadership program, which Maddie and Jackson are a part of, and we really focus on leadership skills so that when they both leave YSP, they will be able to go out into the community and have these leadership skills that they can leverage into other jobs or school or other opportunities that they have in life. Promote youth-led programs. This is huge. Let youth run programs. Like I had said, Maddie and Jackson, they both run different work groups with adult partners. They also run our general member meetings and they make the agendas. And it just creates a safer space for those youth that we work with. Listen and validate young people by inviting them to share their thoughts, experiences, and feelings. This ties into kind of tokenism. If we're just having a youth present and not taking them seriously, not listening to their thoughts, experiences, you know, any of that, then it's tokenism. We just have a young person there to check a box and they're not being valued. Take a step back and resist the urge to take over. I am not a micromanager, and I tell Jackson and Maddie this, I don't like to micromanage, and I don't like to have to sit there and, you know, worry, you know, watch them over their shoulder. I trust them. I know that if they have questions, if they need help, they will come, they will ask me, but I trust them to take over those kind of projects. And give young people room to make mistakes and understand that mistakes are part of the learning process. We have all been we've all been every age, right? So we need to remember how we were back then, and that we're learning, right? We're learning how to navigate life. We're learning how to navigate the systems, which we all know are very difficult to navigate. And then why is learning about this important? So showing youth and young adults that their voice has value and power can be life-changing. Oftentimes when a lot of these young people, when they're under the age of 18, they don't really have a lot of say in what happens in their life. Young people will feel safer opening up to you and will be more willing to work with you if they feel respected and like their needs and experiences are being heard. Most youth have had very little power or say over things that have happened in their lives, and not having a say in situations regarding them with adults can be a replication of that trauma. So just something to keep in mind. Another just note that I like to make to everybody is, if you are working with a youth specifically under the age of 18 and you need to make a report to DCYF, which in the state of New Hampshire, everybody, whether you are a service provider or a citizen, just a citizen, everybody is a mandated reporter in the state of New Hampshire. But if you do find yourself having to make a report to DCYF, the best thing that you can do is communicate that with the youth or the family that you are working with, and have that open communication. Because if you are building a relationship with all of these youth, and then they disclose something and you turn around and you report to DCYF and you don't tell them, there goes your entire relationship with that young person. So just really important to keep in mind. Oh, I don't know why that square is there. That's weird. Okay. So we knew that we were doing this presentation, and we brought a few questions to our general membership group, which I didn't mention earlier, but we have a general member group made up of a bunch of young people all across the state of New Hampshire. We meet twice a month, and we talk about things happening in New Hampshire that pertain to youth homelessness. We work on different projects during that time. It's a space for youth to build their own community and things like that. So what we did was we brought a few questions to them at our last general member meeting, and we asked them what they would like mental health providers or service providers in general to know about their experience with youth homelessness. So these are direct quotes, direct thoughts from our youth. Jackson took amazing notes. And so I'll just read through these, and then I'm gonna open it to Maddie and Jackson to see if you guys want to add or share anything else. But some therapists emphasize medication use to regulate emotions instead of using soft skills to help people work through their issues. It's really hard when therapists leave. Providers mentioning topics youth aren't ready to discuss and incentivize disconnect from services. So this is something that we sometimes see in some youth programs too, where they're incentivizing you being done with the program, right? They're like, well, when you're done, oh, you'll get this when you complete this program, instead of continuing with services and encouraging more services. Some barriers are mailing address. There was a lot of barriers during COVID. A lot of things were over telehealth, which a lot of youth don't have access to a safe place, or a phone or Wi-Fi to do those meetings. And then obviously long wait times, that's kind of not in anybody's control. We know how staffing can be. Really important that therapists are keeping up with continuing education and continuing to learn. I think a lot of our young people have had the experience that, which I think it says in here, right here, some youth feel that the therapists get to a certain point in their career where they don't actually care about the human they are talking to. So just, we all get burnt out, but just making sure that, you know, we're doing this work for a reason, and we need to make sure that our youth are not feeling any secondhand feelings, maybe with stuff that we have going on in our life. Really helpful when they listen and reflect back versus being told what to do. Really helpful when they listen and oh, that's on there twice. Whoops. Transferring medical records is bureaucratic, or you must print out the form from the facility, but you must pay to print these, and then transportation becomes an issue. So when talking about medical release records and things like that, sending it over DocuSign on your phone may not be accessible to a lot of youth. And a lot of places don't even have the option for you to DocuSign, and you have to print it out and all of that, which again, then costs the youth money. It's another process, another step that youth who are likely in some sort of a crisis don't have the capacity to do so. Team-based structure among therapists create unsafe environments for clients with already limited access to services. So there are some companies and organizations that do team-based structure with their therapists, which causes like a confidentiality concern for a lot of our youth. So that is what that is speaking to. And some youth are afraid of doctors or service providers because they are scary. This is a serious barrier. So this is something that came up a lot. And something that we often hear from our youth is that they do not access services because they are afraid they're not going to be believed, or they're not going to be taken seriously, or they're scary, right? And so this is just some of our young people's thoughts. So Jackson, Maddie, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
I mean, I just feel like there's a certain human aspect that gets lost when dealing with young people, and it almost becomes like you're working with a child or like a pet. And I think people forget that at one point they were also a young person, and that, you know, just because someone is young doesn't mean that they want to be talked down to, especially when they're looking for support and help from you.
Thank you. Maddie, do you have anything?
Not really. I feel like the list that we came up with in our general meeting covered a lot of what I had to say. So
Awesome. Cool. All right, now we'll open it up to some questions.
And really quickly, if anyone here has questions that they're not comfortable asking directly, you can feel free to message me in the chat with that question and I can ask it for you.
And we're also all learning, and youth homelessness is very new to a lot of people. Homelessness is very in-depth, so we are all learning. So if you do have like questions, like we encourage you to ask, because this stuff is really important, and it's really important to the youth in our communities. So yeah.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I volunteer quite heavily at New Hampshire Hospital. I was working a lot with the kids and youths before they were transferred over to New Hampstead. And recurrent, I mean, seriously recurrent issues about that they were languishing on the units in New Hampshire Hospital because they had absolutely no place to go, no place to live. So they were basically just being institutionalized. And so this was pretty concerning to me, devastating for me to hear this. Do you guys ever go into, because I know that like there are like what you consider use still at New Hampshire Hospital with these problems. Do you ever work with these hospitals and reach out to these kids? It just really bothers me.
Yeah, so we aren't super connected to any hospitals. We have a lot of youth who have experience being institutionalized that we work with. or being hospitalized. It's definitely something we are open to. We definitely go to a lot of different programs and talk about what we do and try to, you know, get youth involved in what we do. But we haven't really explored that aspect of it yet. So, but we're not opposed to it. And I'm sure that our young people would be really open to expanding into some of those areas.
Thank you.
Example, also really just highlights the systems level failure here, right? That these systems are failing these youth and they're going here because they need to get their needs met. And that's their only option. So that's a really great example to highlight that systems failure.
Yeah. We find that a lot, that often when youth are either institutionalized, hospitalized, whatever that looks like, when they are then released from those programs or systems, they often are back to square one, and they often have no solution for, you know, for the problem that they had kind of went in for. We know that it's really difficult to get anything done when you are homeless. I know, like, in my experience, I was homeless when I was in college. Focusing on schoolwork and papers and all of that stuff when you're simply worrying about where you're going to lay your head at night is just, it's a lot, it's so much for people to kind of handle. So when you don't have somewhere to live, and then, you know, you go to a treatment program, and then you get out, you still don't have a solution to your housing problem, and there's no programs that sort of fill that gap between getting out of hospitalization or getting out of maybe incarceration, and what that looks like post release, I guess. I don't know, Jackson and Maddie, if you guys have anything to add to that.
No, I think you summarized it pretty well.
Agreed.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are some of the services that you provide for unhoused youth in our community? And how do you go about connecting with these youth or finding youth to bring into your programs?
Yeah, so we don't do any direct case management. So we are not like directly we are helping these youth, but we are not like directly case managing them. So we, like I had said, we have a board of general members that we meet twice a month, and these are folks under the age of 25. We have as young as 16. And so all youth are paid for their time. So our general members are paid $20 an hour for their time, and our leaders are paid $30 an hour for their time. So we really value paying our youth for their expertise. And so in these meetings, in these general meetings, we focus on different projects that we have going on. So currently, you know, we're working with the DMV, we're working with colleges and universities, which Jackson is leading, sort of bridging the gap for homeless youth in colleges. So it's the single point of contact work group, really working on that K through 12 and college liaison, and sort of bridging that gap. We work on rural outreach, which Maddie is overseeing that grant and that work group. And so we provide a community to youth, and really an environment where their voice is heard and valued, and they actually see direct change from a lot of the stuff that we do. So we partner with Waypoint, and a lot of other different youth providers across the state. Molly and I both go to the drop-in centers through Waypoint, and we connect with youth there, and help them, you know, on certain things. If youth are specifically really passionate about a specific topic, it's something that they're able to explore within YSP, and we can advocate for that. Our leader program, so we are recruiting for both leaders and members, so I can send out flyers and things like that. But our leaders, they are really the ones that do a lot of the, we work remote, but groundwork for a lot of this stuff. So in our leaders program, we are really working one-on-one with them to create strong, empowered voices that they feel comfortable using and leveraging. So like I had said, Jackson is leading the single point of contact work group, which is a pretty big work group and a pretty big undertaking. And it's taken, like time for Jackson to grow into that program. But it's really just a space for professional development and getting involved in really big system level changes. So something that I just like to brag about a little bit is Jackson and I met with the director of the DMV a few months ago, and we really talked about the barriers that young people face when it comes to driver's ed and licensing and the costs and vehicles and all of this kind of stuff. And we know that New Hampshire is quite rural, so getting to a lot of these DMVs are difficult for a lot of youth, unless maybe you're in a city like Manchester where it's more local. So what we really talked about with the director was making driver's ed more accessible to youth who maybe can't pay for it or maybe don't have a vehicle. And something that we had also talked about was the DMV had said that in Manchester, every couple of months, a few staff from the DMV would go to the shelter and help people fill out paperwork there. And so we were kind of like, okay, like that's great, but then they have to get that paperwork. Like there's a lot of follow-up that needs to happen. So after this conversation, we were informed that the DMV is actually rolling out a van that will go to different youth shelters and different shelters across the state where they can actually process applications right there in the van for all of these folks who may not be able to get to the DMV or things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for change within YSP, and we touch a lot of different groups of people. And so so we do kind of a lot, but we really offer like that community and learning and building skills that I know Jackson talks about this a lot, about like his leadership development and how he compares that to other things in his life but outside of YSP. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
I was going to ask, are there case management services that are strictly for youth?
Yes. So there's, obviously we have DCYF as like the overall, right? But Waypoint specifically, they offer case management to youth under the age of 25. And they have a shelter, they have different housing programs and things like that. There's a program in Claremont, called the Claremont Learning Partnership. They have an Oasis Teen Shelter there. They offer case management. Center for Life the Upper Room in Derry, they offer specifically like youth services. They don't have housing attached, but they do offer like strictly case management for youth. So there aren't as many programs. There's one up in North Country, Tri-County CAP. They work with youth up there. So they're spread apart. A lot of programs, I know like 100 Nights in Keene, they do work with 18 to 25-year-olds, but they also work with 18 plus. So it's not youth specific.
Okay. I'm just asking, sometimes I've had a couple of youth that I work with who are leaving like a residential episode of treatment, but they're not welcome to go home. And, they're 18. So just kind of a way to direct them to somewhere they can get extra support.
Yeah, you can always write down, this is my email and Molly's email, and then our Facebook and Instagram and all of that. So if you want to write down our emails and connect with us about youth that you're working with, we can kind of help make those connections and point you in the right direction for that youth.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Going off of that, do you have a list of New Hampshire-based resources for youth or young adults experiencing homelessness that we could potentially share with people who are attending the session?
So we don't, but this is a common question.
Well, we have a
Um,
small list of different like food pantries and stuff on our website, and I'm sure we could add more resources to that. We've listed numbers for like Waypoint. We also have like 411 and stuff like that.
um, in a perfect world, we would have a lovely list compiled of all of the youth providers and stuff. Jackson, I know you can probably speak to this a little bit. And when I'm just thinking about the single points of contact have also asked this question too. So no, on our website, we have a lot of different resources listed. We have our community plan. There's a lot of stuff on our website. But we don't have like a specific list, I guess.
Yeah, in my work group, we're following up with 211 to see if we can get access to their massive spreadsheet. And
Smart.
that's a process. So yeah, I mean, in time, it would be really nice if YSP could have access to that and then make it, actually readable and something that you can toy around with. But yeah, New Hampshire is like really small and close, but communication is definitely not our strongest thing that we have. And working to improve that from a massive system level is definitely a grave undertaking.
And it takes the whole community. So don't be afraid to advocate for the youth in your community. Yeah. And if you work for like a different organization and are interested in having us come and speak about, we speak about a plethora of things. So if you're interested in having us come do a training, I put my email and Molly's email in the chat and our website. So you guys can get a hold of us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to help us learn more about this topic. And I am so excited that we are recording this tonight and we will be getting the chance to share this with folks in the future as well. Thank you all again for the work that you do. And thank you everyone who participated tonight. I hope to see you again soon at another one of our NAMI New Hampshire trainings.